Hello everyone, and a very happy new year. Although it's probably a little bit to say that now. Anyways, hope you all had a fantastic celebration and are ready to kick some ass in the new year. I'm personally still getting the whole engine rolling, setting things up and all that, so I figured why not begin the new year with some fresh questions. So that's what we're going to do today. Before we kick off though, for those that might have missed it, they've released 3 pictures as a preview for Chronicles Volume 3. One of them shows the sexy Kafun in Anchorage, one has Arvis and Jaina on a lovely date, and one showing the moments in which Wrathion returned home from saving his son out of the clutches of Onyxia. Volume 2 left us with the destruction of Draenor, closed in the Dark Portal, and Cho'Gall traveling to answer the call of the Old Gods. These pictures, they seem to indicate that we'll get more details on how the story from the Warcraft comics is now going to play out with the interesting twist of Nomadan. I don't think anyone really feels sorry about it, but I am very curious as to how they're going to tell the tale without him in it, since he did influence a whole lot of events. We also have Jaina and Arvis together, which seems to place the period of time that they're going to cover from Warcraft 3 into Classic World of Warcraft. Bit up in the air how far into Classic they're going to go, since Wrathion returning home that was in between patches, but it makes sense to cover Warcraft 3 and Classic in one single go. A lot of events in Classic, they were built on the story from Warcraft 3, which would then have Volume 4, if there is going to be a 4th one, that would cover the expansions from the Burning Crusade all the way to Battle for Azeroth. That's a way it could play out, but of course I have no idea. The pictures do look amazing though, I can't wait to get my hands on it. It's still a bit away, so let's begin answering some questions, starting with a whole bunch of them from "That's not a knife, this is a knife." Where did Illidan get the Sargerite Keystone? He sent out his demon hunters to pick it up from the planet of Mardum just before we take him out at the top of the Black Temple. If the Pantheon was in hiding, why are they able to send a message and destroy the planet in the Ulduar raid? The Pantheon didn't send a signal, it was more of an automatic response. Once the Titans and the Keepers were done bringing order to the planet of Azeroth, Aman'Thul commissioned Castellar Algalon the Observer to serve as the world's celestial guardian. The possibility that the world's soul could become corrupted, that was one that the Titans could not ignore. Should that come to pass, Algalon had the power to initiate a procedure that would activate the Forge of Origination, purging the world of life and any corruption that was present. Loken fell under Yogg-Saron's corruption, and he did some sabotage, making it so that his death that would send out a signal and call down Algalon. That's exactly what happened. As we took him out during Wrath of the Lich King, Algalon began his scan of the planet, and he found it to be corrupted, in need of a purge.
It is in the universe's best interest to re-originate this planet should my analysis find systemic corruption. Do not interfere.
We smacked some sense into him, and instead of sending out a signal that would activate the Doomsday device located in Uldum, we got the reply code to cancel this, and a lovely speech from Ronin, although some might say that the speech is worse than destruction. This Doomsday device is also something that Deathwing was after during the Cataclysm, but we stopped him from getting it. Wrathion isn't doing anything. Why not? He was obsessed with the Legion during Mist of Pandaria. That's a call made by Blizzard. He was part of the High Mountain experience during beta times, where he even explained what went down with Garrosh and Warlords of Draenor, but they decided to cut him out and replace him with Ebonhorn. Possibly because they have a storyline planned between them, but that's unsure at this point. He also shows up in the Chromie scenario, but there's a scenario in a timeline that should not be. So yeah, I'm definitely with you on this one. He should have played a role against the Legion, considering that he was the one warning us all about their coming. What has Jaina been doing? Could the "her heart is a crater and we have filled it" line apply to her, not the Titan? Jaina bailed on the Kid and Tor after they decided to let the Horde come back in, and she hasn't done anything since. Rumor has it that she made her way to Kal Tiras and will have a part to play in the next expansion. Now those lines, to your question, could they apply to her? Yes, they could. At this point, it's all speculation and nothing set in stone. Why do we need to protect the Titan? There have been other worlds with dead Titans, like Argus. The planet doesn't collapse after we kill it, as far as we know. Hard to say what exactly happens to a world when the Titan spirit inside dies. Argus is indeed an example of a planet who lost its spirits, but that was under unusual circumstances, and we don't see the long-term effects. For all we know, there could be massive fell geysers spawning out of the world, and all that will be left behind is going to die. That's extremely hard to say, that's another part that we see in the story. In the case of Azeroth's Titan, not only death is an issue, there's also the bit of the old gods corrupting its spirits. This is what Sargeras feared so much that he formed the Burning Legion, and he decided to wipe out all life in the universe. Potentially, this wound will be a great opportunity for the old gods to rise up and try to seize control, so not just death of the world is a problem, but also this corruption. Who knows what happens if the spirit actually dies, but I doubt it will be anything good, and apparently we are told by the speaker, by everybody on the planet, that we need to save this spirit. Speaking of Sargeras and his plans, a Shaylin Govender asks, does no one want to point out that Sargeras isn't actually evil? After all, the reason he marshaled the forces of the Burning Legion was to use them against the old gods, Power of the Shadow, Void Lords. He wanted to kill the world titans, not corrupt as it turns out from the draining of their power, so that the Void Lords were unable to corrupt them. I hope to create a new faction, the Burning Legion, in which we are able to play as Demon Lords and Nafrazim, and we find out at the end of Antorus, the other titans subdue Sargeras, and they realize he isn't evil in actuality. They strike a deal with him, maybe to use the Burning Legion to seek out worlds whose titans have already been corrupted and destroyed those. And then our next big boss can be venturing into the void to defeat the Void Lords, and just before we go, maybe an expansion prior, the aspects make a return. New aspects for each Dragonflight to help us fight the Void Lords. Anyone else think that that's a good route to go? It will be a route that goes against what's been established in the Chronicles, since the Titans, they were aware of his fears, and they didn't agree with his course of action. Good or evil is always a matter of perspective, a point of view, and for us, as well as the Titans, Sargeras is evil. He wants to murder us all, and while his motives are to stop the bigger and greater threats, the Titans don't believe that that's the only solution. They hope that Azeroth's Titan, by containing the corruption and putting machines to help him mature, they hope that it can one day wake up and be even more powerful than Sargeras was, to stand with them against the darkness. Titans are not all-knowing. Just look at the storyline with Algalon the Observer. We showed him that from a world corrupted and in Sargeras' eyes doomed, hope and strength can grow. We stood against challenges beyond our imagining, even stood with our very creators, and perhaps we can indeed prevail the darkness of the Void Lords. On top of that, apparently Azeroth is the last Titan. If we can prevent it from being corrupted, then the Void Lords fail and Sargeras' fears are no longer there. It doesn't mean that they're no longer a threat, of course, but at least that plan will come to an end. And yeah, I mean, good or evil, it's a matter of perspective. For us, being wiped out, that is pretty bad. Then, a question that I get quite frequently, which is, how would I rank the endings of each expansion? Quite often on stream, people ask me what I think about the ending of Legion, and how I would rank the other endings of the expansions. Now this is of course entirely opinion based, but I'll do my best to rank them and explain why. The ending of Classic, however, that doesn't really apply for me. It was one of the first times that we got to see Warcraft in an MMORPG form, and the story was all over the place. There was somewhat of a story of course, but there was definitely a switch in focus around the Wrath of the Lich King periods, not to mention that a whole lot of people, including myself, didn't even finish Naxxramas and didn't experience the ending, so that one is not on my list. So, from best to worst, in my opinion, the ending of Legion, that's the best one that they've done so far. Kinda funny as well, considering the visions that were shown in the Illidan novel, I definitely had my worries. I feared that they were actually going to turn Illidan into this holy angel flying above the battlefield as described in that book, but quite the opposite happened, as he rejected a gift from Zera. The expansion story itself, there was a massive invasion from the Legion, whereas the Tomb of Sargeras and the defeat of Kil'jaeden, that could have been a proper cutting point in the story. The rift is sealed at the tomb, Kil'jaeden crashes on Argus, and we make our escape with a massive rift in the sky. They could have ended it there and keep Argus for the next expansion, but the storyline actually continued. We partied on the planet, and we confronted the big boss of the Legion, Sargeras himself. When I say we confronted him, I mean Mythic Raiders got a very small taste of his power. The Dark Titan is sucked into the throne and Illidan stays behind, leaving the door open for the next expansion with the sword in the world. The reason why it falls under one of the best endings is not because it's perfect. I feel like there should have been more motivation for Illidan to stay behind to make that impact greater, but him staying behind just because Sargeras is there, it's not bad. It's alright. It's the road that he apparently took. Apparently everything that he's ever done in his life, that was to take on the Legion. So he decides to stay behind and let others take care of more threats from the universe. Still strange to me that those voice lines of acknowledging Sargeras in the sky, that they haven't popped up yet. It's still very much out of the blue with, oh look, there's a cloud there. Oh, Sargeras is inside. Hi Sargeras, how you doing buddy? And now you defeat it. But for the expansion Legion, partying with the Pantheon, imprisoning Sargeras, all of that is pretty awesome. I'm actually happy that we didn't fight Sargeras himself, and apparently on Mythic mode you do get a taste of his power, which make the ending for me one of the best. Second best, that would be the ending of Wrath of the Lich King, since there's only really one thing that bothers me about it. The expansion has us journey to Northrend and take on the threat of the Lich King. Along the way, he would pop up from time to time, he taunted us, guided us, pitched us against some of the most powerful forces that the Scourge had to offer. At the top of Icecrown, our final confrontation took place. Hope was on the horizon, despite Tyrion Fordring being stuck in a block of ice. We were chopping away at the King's health, only to realize that he had been playing with us.
No questions remain unanswered. No doubts linger. Azeroth's greatest champions. You overcame every challenge I laid before you. My mightiest servants have fallen before your relentless onslaught. Your unbridled fury. Is it truly righteousness that drives you? I wonder. You trained them well, Fordring. You delivered the greatest fighting force this world has ever known. Right into my hands, exactly as I intended. You shall be rewarded for your unwitting sacrifice. Watch now, as I raise them from the dead to become masters of the Scourge. They will shroud this world in chaos and destruction. Azeroth's fall will come at their hands, and you will be the first to die.
We are Azeroth's greatest champions, and the challenges placed before us, they were tests. They to make sure that when the time was right, Arthas could resurrect the greatest fighting force this world had ever known, exactly as he had intended. We took out some of the most powerful troops that the Scourge had to offer, only to realize that we didn't really stand a chance. Not until Tyrion calls for Light's final blessing, he shatters Frostmourne and he gives us the chance for victory.
Father, is it over?
At long last. No king rules forever, my son.
I see. Only darkness before me.
A story that was built up beautifully during Warcraft 3. It rippled and affected so many other storylines, and now found its conclusion here with the death of Arthas. Just cut it here, okay? There's nothing else needed. It was beautiful. Just say goodbye and let it be.
Without its master's command, the restless Scourge will become an even greater threat to this world. Control must be maintained. There must always be a Lich King.
But of course not. We have to keep the door open to potentially bring back the Lich King later on, as Bolvar 4 Dragon places the helmet on his head and he assumes control. My problem with this one, and I know that not everyone agrees, but for me it seems like the story was trying to tell that we overcame the mightiest of foes that the Scourge had to offer. We were the best, the greatest fighting force that this world had ever known. Not to mention that we have the Ashbringer, we have the allegiance of Wormrest Temple, Yogg-Saron is under control, so we have a couple of keepers that are grateful. What exact threat is the Scourge supposed to be to us? Those that had defeated their leader. Let's say for argument's sake that there are indeed powerful troops amongst the Scourge. Maybe the numbers are so great that we just can't take them on, then Northrend is still an island. Contain them, just make a massive army across the Isle. Contain them from the outside, work to the middle, take them out step by step. And even if that's not an option, then put on the freaking helmet, assume control and lead them all to a massive pit. Then we ask some dragons to help us out. We bombard them with airships. No more Scourge to deal with, no more need for Lich King. Done deal, over with. For this ending, I don't think it was needed to have the line of there must always be a Lich King in connection to the overall storyline, but I do really like what they've done with Bolvar in Legion. The Death Knight campaign, that is my favorite one. I creamed my pants when he started talking to me, so I do like what they've done with this window, and I'm curious to see where the story is going to go. But just for the pocket of Wrath the Lich King, the pocket of Arthur's storyline, I don't think that the line of there must always be a Lich King, I don't think that was necessarily needed. Right, hope I explained that one proper. Now on the third spot comes the Burning Crusade, I suppose, although it kinda has the same problems the Classic had, as in, the story wasn't the main focus, and some key elements of the storyline, they were actually separated by faction. It very much builds upon the events of Warcraft 3, with Illidan, Lady Vash and Kil'Thuzz, and then the ending having Kil'Thuzz working for Team Legion, stopping Kil'Jaeden from coming into the world, and Velen reigniting the Sunwell. A lot of this story was also told in the Sunwell comic, but compared to some of the other endings, there isn't that much I could complain about. We went to Outlands, we stopped Illidan and his crew, story shifted to the Legion and Kil'Thuzz, and we stopped them too, with an added bonus of saving the Blood Elves with their addiction. All of that said though, now that we have Legion, and apparently Illidan was working against the Legion all along, you have to wonder if that storyline even mattered. Imagine if we never went to Outlands. Would Illidan have been able to stop the Legion? Could he have been the one to prevent Warlords of Draenor from ever happening? My god, what have we done, people? But yeah, not so much I can say about this one, be it for good or for bad. It is what it is, it's its own pocket back then. The ending of Burning Crusade. Then, I'll place Mr. Pandaria on number 4, because it was quite a shit show near the end. Those who were around during that time, you might remember Blizzard trying to explain why exactly the Alliance was helping out the Horde with their Siege of Orgrimmar, and they came up with a whole bunch of reasons. We were going to go in as spies, we were going to hurt the Horde from within, we're going to make use of this opportunity, but in the end, we just teamed up because apparently Garrus' Horde, it was so powerful, despite most members of the Horde stepping away, that it still needed the united might of the Alliance and the Horde. Going into Siege was quite a mess, but the story itself, it reached its conclusion with kicking out Garrosh out of the Mantle of Leadership. But what then? How was this faction war going to come to a conclusion? Well, Jaina definitely had something to say about that.
Ugh, look at them. Already they plot against us. Seize this moment, Varian. Dismantle the Horde.
But that was of course not an option. Players still needed a faction to play in, so instead we ended it the same way that we went in, with quite a bit of a shit show.
Very well. The Horde has committed heinous crimes, Vol'jin. But some among you fought against Garrosh's tyranny. For that, I am willing to end this bloodshed. But know this. If your Horde fails to uphold honor as Garrosh did, we will end you.
Now don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating the murder of all the Hordes, but from the Alliance point of view, just stepping away and doing nothing in this moment, it's just ridiculous. At the very least, they could have sat down and discussed measurements to make sure that the Horde could not reform and be a threat, maybe even absorb some of the factions within the Alliance. The Blood Elves nearly did that on their own anyways, and most of the other races they could have been taken in, but again, that wouldn't really have worked out with the whole gameplay aspect of things. Varian mentioned that if you ever do this again, we will end you, and then in the very next expansion, the Horde strikes out in Ashran. But I guess that's what's with honor, so it's okay to lose so many soldiers when you had the opportunity for world peace. They also decided to put Garrus on trial, which was kinda interesting at the start. A trial in Warcraft, a chance to catch people up with the past events within the novel war crimes, and realizing that everyone had the potential to become a Garrosh, but they didn't. There was even a glimmer of hope of some more character development for Garrosh, but unfortunately, that never played out, and all we got was the same Garrosh as we had during Mr. Pandaria, which means that they only had him on trial so he could kick off the next expansion, Warlords of Draenor. How cool would it have been if he had discovered that his visions of the Horde of Old was wrong, that his love for the old ways was not the way to go? How cool would it have been for Thrall to join him on this journey and realize that his ways aren't always the way to go either, but instead we got Warlords of Draenor, so yeah. Speaking of Warlords, that's the one that comes next, because it's Warlords of Draenor. That's really all I need to say. A lot of things got cut out, a lot of changes in the story direction, but that ending, ooh boy. You might remember that sexy introduction trailer where we have Gromar's Hellscream who says,
"We will never be slaves!" But we will be conquerors.
under the advice of his son Garrosh from an alternate reality, they decided to build a dark portal and connect it to ours. Heroes of Azeroth quickly rose up to fight back against this threat. They kicked the Horde through the red portal and even jumped after them. Grommash was the leader of this Iron Horde, the one who picked the fight, and as we dismantled the Horde, Gul'dan made use of the opportunity. He offered the demon blood once again. This time some of the orcs did accept, and Grommash is put in chains. For no real reason, no real explanation given, we then set Grommash free in the final raid, and instead of punishing him, we let him join the fun. Come on down, Grommash. Join us in taking on Gul'dan and eventually Archimonde, which is of course, you have a great fighter at your side, that's a great benefit, but what are the consequences going to be? What is going to happen to the orc who told Ner'zhul to attack the Draenei, leading to Valen's sacrifice? All the other pain and suffering on Draenor, not to mention that they tried to invade our planet. What will happen to such an orc?
Gul'dan failed. Jaina is free!
Oh, he's a hero now, huh? Yep, that's the perfect ending for Draenor, if you ask me. No consequences, no real story given here. We're Grommash just celebrating with the rest of them. All of a sudden, we're all buddies. Nothing happened, all those dead Draenei. That was my bad. We cool now? Dead in combo with...
I fear this is only beginning.
If you ever need us, we will be here.
Until we meet again.
And then never really showing up in the next expansion, which is not a bad thing, can you imagine the alternates running around on Azeroth? But either way, all of that combined, it places it right there near the top. But the thing is, Draenor is just Draenor. It's an alternate universe that they potentially came up with to connect with the Warcraft movie, but it is just that, an alternate thing. But the last one, the Cataclysm, that has a huge story behind it. A story that started at the dawn of the aspects, where they were blessed by the Titans through their keepers to help safeguard the world. Now Wrathion, also known as Deathwing, he was listening to the whisper of the old gods, and he became corrupted, turned from a guardian into a servant. A whole bunch of storylines, schemes and plans, they came from that design, with the Dragon Soul, the enslavement of Alexstrasza and the Red Dragonflight, the madness of Malygos, the death of Corialstras, nearly marrying Kalia Menethil and weakening the Alliance. Too many to list them all here. They came from Deathwing and the old gods' designs. In the Cataclysm, they were ready to bring all of that together. His madness as he broke out of the planet, it literally transformed the world. And he would do his best to bring about the Hour of Twilight, the moment in which the old gods would rise out of their prisons and rule the world once more. Shaman Thrall, he went on his journey to become Green Jesus, Superman go well, but with a bit of time travel, with a bit of sacrifice here and there, we were able to vanquish Neltharion's madness forever. All fine and dandy, the world is safe from Deathwing, but of course the ones signing his check, the ones behind all of this, the old gods, they're still out there. The area surrounding Wyrmrest Temple is still flooded with the minions. What will the aspects do next?
The champions who fought at our side assured the survival of our world. But now, we must see it with mortal eyes. We dragon aspects have fulfilled our great purpose, and our ancient power is expended.
Yep, they're done. There's no threat to take care of anymore. Everything was used on Deathwing, and now it's up to us mortals to take over and safeguard the world. Alexstrasza says that they fulfilled their great purpose and that their ancient power is expended. Apparently, stopping Deathwing and the Hour of Twilight, that was a great purpose, which it wasn't really. They were created to help safeguard the world and their individual domains, not just do one thing. But regardless, it doesn't even make sense to begin with. It means that they received their powers to stop Deathwing and this Hour of Twilight, who only became Deathwing and so powerful because of the powers that they were given. The purpose of their powers was created by giving them their powers. If there wasn't a blessing, then there would have been no aspects, there would have been no Deathwing as we saw him at the end of the Cataclysm, therefore no purpose for the great power. You might argue that if it had not been Deathwing, then the old gods would have found someone else, which is fine, there's not much to be said against it, but that's not the case. We didn't get someone else for the ending of the Cataclysm, we got Deathwing in all of his corrupted madness, taken out by the aspects, who then not only lose their immortality, but also a huge portion of their power because they have fulfilled their mission. Because, there's no other threat ever again that we could use to help with. The Age of Mortals is upon us, let's blow up some cities and embrace the power of the old gods. And of course, on top of losing their power and their immortality, dragons can also no longer reproduce. Bit of a shit ending, in my opinion, which makes it my least favorite ending of Warcraft. And in an interview between Jesse Cox, Crendor, and Ian Hassakostas, Jesse asked, what is up with the dragons?
What is going on over there with these dragons? Are we going to get some crazy dragon stuff? Because if they are cool, help me understand what's going to happen. Are we going to have more dragon story in the future?
I think that seems very likely. I mean, certainly when you're level 112, as we learned in the Chromie scenario, dragons are going to be very important. But part of the storytelling and the world building, it's always this trick of balancing, the story we're telling now without completely closing off opportunities in the future. And to some extent, they're literary devices, right? Yes, you killed Illidan back in Black Temple. He seemingly was defeated, but as we're planning out the framework of the Legion expansion, man, wouldn't it be awesome to have Illidan around, and wouldn't there be so many opportunities? Well, what if we tweak a couple of things? What if there's a little bit of retconning going on, but what if we open this door to let us tell an awesome new story? And I think similarly, it was never our intent back in Cataclysm to close the door forever on, okay, dragons are gone, there's never going to be any in the future, and we can't do anything again, no more dragon raid bosses, etc. But yes, we know there's rebuilding to do there if we want to ever focus the storyline around them in the same ways.
So, to roughly summarize that, they never meant to completely shut down any and old story with dragons. It might have looked like we took care of Illidan, but look at him going now. They could potentially do something like that with the dragons as well, which I don't really know how to feel about. On the one hand, it's kind of cool to have the idea of more dragon stories in World of Warcraft, but on the other hand, it makes endings, conclusions to stories absolutely pointless. How can you possibly tell a good overarching storyline without actual real consequences? Merely a setback was the joke when they kept bringing back Kill for Sunstrider, and that's kind of the issue for the overall story of Warcraft. Nobody is ever truly dead. There's always a chance for them to come back if Blizzard decides that it would be cool to do so. All the same, the ending of the Cataclysm was pretty bad in my opinion. But like I said, this is all just opinion based. Let me know what your favorite and least favorite ending is. I'm sure that everybody has their own reasons and motivations. Then, as our final question for today, from CBGB Clark. Hey Noble, I'm curious if you think Blizz is running out of potential bad guys in the WoW universe. With the Legion taken care of, the Scourge controlled, the Nightmare being relatively controlled and slightly overused. What is left? Obviously, the Void/Old Gods come to mind, but is that enough? I wonder if Blizz might have to start introducing some completely new foes within the Warcraft universe. Yes, I definitely agree. It's time for the roster to expand again, but at the same time, it's kinda tricky to do so within World of Warcraft. With nearly every expansion, they've pitched us against something bigger, more powerful than the last one. Prime example would be Warlords with Archimonde, and now the ending of Legion with Argus the Unmaker empowered by Sargeras. Sure enough, with nearly every victory, there are also circumstances which enable us to win. Tyrion shattering Frostmourne, throwing the aspects with the Dragonsoul, the Pantheon helping us out. There are outside forces empowering and aiding us, but you still get the job done. Where do you go from taking on Space Satan? And apparently it's going back to the faction war that we're so familiar with. This will hopefully not be the only storyline of Battle for Azeroth. We already got some hints at things to come, but say that the story is going to flow into the Void Lords. Where do you go from there? Good question, and not even the Chronicles really has an answer for it. Now my hope, and some told me that it's not going to happen, but my hope is for a Warcraft 4 which expands the Warcraft universe. Something maybe set in the far future, which clears the board and gives it a new place to start from. Some references to the days of old of course, but maybe an Azeroth that's been destroyed by some calamity, or an Azeroth where we see brand new races that popped up and have now formed factions. New threats popping up in the universe, or perhaps it's time to leave this one behind altogether. Now the luxury of a fantasy story is that you could take it anywhere you want. If they wanted to, they could have the infinite Dragonflight mess up the timelines, and they place us in a timeline where everything's topsy-turvy, everything's upside down. But at the same time, it's difficult to build up something meaningful and powerful while also having a player base that needs their playground within World of Warcraft. At the end of the day, we need to win. We need our factions to play with, and I wonder how long they'll keep it going, but I'm also curious to see where the road's going to take us. So a little bit of vague answer, I realize that. I'm unfortunately not a story writer, but maybe you guys and girls have ideas on where they could take the story next. Feel free to leave it in the comments down below. For now though, it's time to end the first Q&A of 2018 and get ready to pump out those videos. Get ready to tell more stories. I can't wait to get started. If you have any questions that you'd like to see answered, then leave them in the comments down below and I might use them for the next video. Subscribe if you like what I do. And until next time guys, see ya!